United States is fully lifting the ban on the sale of military equipment to Vietnam that has been in place for some 50 years. As with all our defense partners, sales will need to still meet strict requirements, including those related to human rights. But this change will ensure that Vietnam has access to the equipment it needs to defend itself.
President Obama earlier today in Vietnam announcing that our nation will end the arms embargo against that country. Is this some sort of move of geopolitical mastermind, or just how should we take a look at this? Well, let's talk about it with two gents who know whereof they speak. First, from Newsmax Washington, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra, currently a Shillman Senior Fellow at the Investigative Project on Terrorism. He's also the author of the book, Architects of Disaster, The Destruction of Libya. And joining us via Skype from Tampa, Florida, former intelligence officer, Colonel Derek Harvey, also served as an advisor to General David Petraeus. Gentlemen, we welcome you both, but Colonel Harvey, let me start with you. Lifting this arms embargo against the communist nation of Vietnam, is it a counterbalance to what's going on with the Chinese, or is this just part of Mr. Obama's apology tour and placating our former communist foes?
I think it's positioning in the geopolitical realm to try to provide some support to allies or friends in the region that can help begin to check a little bit of the venturesome activities of China into the South China Sea. What we're doing is not very much, but it's beginning to open a crack in the relationship, and these arms sales will not make a big difference, but it's a good first step.
Pete, do you agree?
In this president's history to indicate that he's capable of a master geopolitical stroke. You want to have a geopolitical stroke in that part of the world, strengthen your relationship with Taiwan, Indonesia, the Philippines. Those are the kinds of things that you need to be doing. The really disappointing thing here, JD, is once again, one of our former enemies, we give them something. We still have roughly 1,500 MIAs in Southeast Asia. You would have hoped that the president would have come back with some more information on that and put that on the negotiating table and said, until you answer some more questions about MIAs, we're not going to do anything with you like this.
Well, let's go to the phones. I understand we have a Vietnam veteran on the line from Lady Lakes, Florida. Alan is with us. Alan, your take on lifting the embargo on Vietnam?
Well, I would agree with not lifting the embargo. I served during the Vietnam era, and I think that this president, as they're saying, is looking for a geopolitical stroke of some sort. He's not going to make it. The guy makes an issue out of the non-issue, and he just doesn't make good decisions.
Hey, Alan, let me ask you, when you saw the pictures, and we're seeing the pictures now of the joint press conference, but when you saw President Barack Obama of the United States standing there with the leader of Vietnam underneath the bust of Ho Chi Minh, what was your reaction, Alan?
Well, if you remember, it was my brother was over there in Vietnam, and he says there's a plaque there now that said, "Thank you, Jane Fonda and John Kerry, for helping us win the war in against the Americans." That's in Vietnam.
Alan, we appreciate your service and that of your brother, Alan, a Vietnam-era veteran, his brother actually in the fight there in Southeast Asia. Let's go now to the fight against terror. Hundreds of Americans, thousands of Americans died in Fallujah. You recall how tough it was to gain control of that city when we put boots on the ground in Iraq. But since January of 2014, it's been controlled by ISIS. But now Iraq is trying to take it back with the help of U.S. airstrikes. Colonel Harvey, ISIS has had a couple of years to become entrenched, dig in, and basically stay put. Or will our airstrikes and Iraq's ground performance be enough to push them out?
Well, it very well could be if the Iraqi political leadership and the military is determined to take the fight to ISIS in Fallujah. But the way they're going to fight this combat is not going to be the way we did it in 2004 or later on during other street campaigns in Fallujah and Ramadi and elsewhere. that city will essentially be obliterated, much as we saw in Ramadi and in Tikrit. And the U.S. forces will be providing precise strikes, but the Iraqi offensive will be about pounding and grinding out this campaign with artillery and demolitions, and there won't be much left of the city.
Well, you know, Pete, I guess in military terms, it's called economy of force. Why we didn't, when we saw those American contractors hanged from the bridge, why we didn't drop leaflets saying, get your women and children out, and drop incendiary bombs and turn that into the Dresden of Iraq, I will never understand. That's just my personal opinion on it. And you hear what the colonel has to say. You know, Fallujah goes through the meat grinder again. Politically, what are you hearing from our intelligence community? Is there enough of a political consensus left in Iraq to have an effective ground force go in and retake Fallujah?
Well, I think the indications are very clear, JD, that there will be an effective ground force to take Fallujah. There's probably less than 1,000 ISIS fighters left in Fallujah. They've been blockaded for quite some time. But I think the other key point here is this is an Iranian offensive. It is guided by the Iranians. They've got their IRG forces, the Shiite militias, working with the government and the force out of Baghdad. We're providing some air cover. But here, the amazing thing is, JD, we're partnering with the Iranians to beat ISIS. And, we won't even help the Kurds and the Sunni tribes. This is, the world is head over heels in this part of the world and in our effort to confront and defeat ISIS.
And still in the minds of a lot of our viewers, a lot of concerns about what transpired earlier today in Vietnam. From Morgantown, West Virginia, Chris is on the phone to give us his take of the president today in Vietnam and lifting the arms embargo. Chris, your take on it.
JD and guests, how you doing this evening?
Fine, thank you, Chris.
Well, I think it's an error. I seem to think that they should, it's good to make smart choices with the enemies you've once had in the past, but he needs to proceed with some type of hesitation. Not only here, he did the same thing just not too long ago in Cuba. And these are dictatorships. I mean, this is not a good thing that's going on right now. I don't think he's making the right decision based upon everything that I see going on in the world today.
Chris, we appreciate your assessment, and also as I was hearing you speak, I think of what our first Commander-in-Chief, George Washington, had to say. We have no permanent adversaries, we have no permanent allies. Instead, we only have permanent interests. What is in the best interest of the American people? We should give our Commander-in-Chief, our current Commander-in-Chief, a chance to comment on something else in the news today, specifically the death via drone of a Taliban commander. Here is the president with the announcement.
It has been confirmed that he is dead, and he is an individual who, as head of the Taliban, was specifically targeting U.S. personnel and troops inside of Afghanistan who are there as part of the mission that I've set to be able to maintain a counterterrorism platform and provide assistance and training to the Afghan military forces there.
It is a paradox, Colonel Harvey, of this president's stewardship of our conflicts. Now he's been at war longer than any other American president, even as Valerie Jarrett was on 60 Minutes the other night, said he ended 2 wars. Your take on this drone attack that I believe went into the airspace of Pakistan?
That's correct, and I applaud the killing of Mullah Mansour, who has been a very dangerous and problematic leader trying to pull the Taliban together after the death of Mullah Omar. But the problem is that we should have had more of these types of strikes targeting the Taliban leadership with a drone campaign over the last number of years. And as long as we allow them to have sanctuary, this isn't going to make much of a difference. The only way this changes is if the president authorizes a continued and consistent campaign, just like we went after al-Qaeda core in Pakistan territory. It's the only way it's going to make any difference. Otherwise, this is a blip, and we may in fact wind up with a more dangerous leader leading the Taliban after the passing of Mansour.
Last comment goes to a caller from Atlanta, Georgia. We've got Pam. Pam, you've got 30 seconds. Make them count.
Okay, all I can say is if you've got the most unprecedented administration in history who's blown up 7 countries under one administration, we get that the jihad have their own agenda, but so do we. And you can't lead from behind and think you're going to get ahead doing that. If you don't know who the enemy is, it's called Sun Tzu warfare. Know your enemy. Use his strength against himself, not us. And quit using us to prop up whatever his foreign policy agenda is.
A good piece of advice, Pam. We're caught by the clock. Our thanks to Pete and to Derek. When we come back, we are going to talk Obamacare, something that was done the other day via stealth. We'll have a